It's time once again to celebrate the best anime shows of the year by making a completely subjective list and then treating it like gospel truth. So let's do that. One important note, I only include seasons that had their debut in the calendar year of 2024. This means that Frieren and the Apothecary Diaries will not be on this list because they both started in 2023. You can find my thoughts on both of those shows elsewhere on my channel, and this will allow me to highlight a couple more shows that otherwise would not get the recognition. Here's my number 5 pick for 2024. Number 5, Blue Box. There are 5 or 6 shows that I considered for the final spot in the top 5, but when I was watching something like Alya Sometimes Hides Her Feelings in Russian, I always felt like I was watching a TV show. With Blue Box, just about every scene feels like a movie. This is clearly a show with a large budget that was worked on by talented artists. High schooler Taiki Inamata has a crush on his senpai, Chinatsu Kano, who is one of the star athletes at the school and is very popular for her kindness, talent, and sociability. She's a dedicated basketball player who's shooting for nationals. Taiki himself is a pretty decent badminton player, and he tries to practice at the same time as Kano-senpai as often as he can at their school gym. Due to a twist that every reviewer spoils, but I won't, the two get to spend a lot of time together, and their relationship gains an added dimension as they push each other to reach for more as athletes. One thing that's fun about this show is that it's both a well-made romantic anime and a well-made sports anime, so you get a little bit or a lot of both depending on the episode. There's also a fun supporting cast with Taiki's friend Kyo, a fairly reserved member of the badminton team who keeps Taiki grounded, and Hina, who's probably the best character in the show. She's Taiki's childhood friend, and she might be even a bigger deal as an athlete than Chinatsu. Though because her sport is rhythmic gymnastics, she doesn't get quite as much fanfare as the school's star basketball player. She's feisty and has a prankster streak in her, so her addition to the cast really balances out the show, since I thought that Taiki and Chinatsu were really easy to root for, but they don't have the biggest personalities. This anime might not be everyone's pick because of the genres involved, but if you do like romance or sports anime, this was one of the better shows of the year. Number 4, Kaiju No. 8. Kaiju No. 8 is about a guy who wants to become part of the local monster fighting force, who instead becomes a monster. The man's name is Kafka Hibino, and yes, that's a deliberate reference to Franz Kafka and his short story The Metamorphosis. The main characters in Kaiju No. 8 and Metamorphosis both assume monstrous forms, but that's where the similarities stop. Everything that Franz Kafka wrote has this sense of impending doom. He could write a grocery list that would make you question your own existence. But the tone of Kaiju No. 8 has none of that. It's pure battle shonen action fun. This show was meant to be watched all at once. I'm not sure if I would have put it this high if I was watching it week to week as it came out, but it makes a great binge watch. There's tons of gross exploding monster guts and showdowns with huge, overbearing foes, but 2 things that make the show stand out are its humor and the fact that it develops its cast. This show can be really funny, usually at Hibino's expense, and seeing him still cling to his goals while the show makes him the butt of the jokes makes him easily likable. Another thing that I enjoyed was that the show takes the time to flesh out some of the characters in its cast. Now, this is still a shonen show about fighting monsters. You're not going to get a deep psychological study of each character, but it does take the time to give each person more personality than just being able to yell loud and punch hard. This means that some of the battle arcs take a bit longer to proceed through than otherwise, but that's why it's good to have all the episodes available to watch at once. Now you can watch it at whatever pace you want. There were a few shows this year that just made me want to watch the next episode more than Kaiju No. 8, unless maybe we're talking about our next anime on the list. Number 3, Dandadan. Dandadan is about drugs? Being on drugs? That's the impression that I got. For a lot of people, this is going to be their number 1 show of the year. You've got Momo Ayase, who believes in ghosts but not in aliens, and Ken Takakura, who believes in aliens but not in ghosts. And the show, of course, is filled to the brim with both ghosts and aliens. It's an irreverent show that's willing to talk about anything and to put its characters into just about any situation imaginable. Momo is one of my favorite characters of the year, both in her visual design as well as her personality. You know that noise that people make when they're surrounded by idiots and they know that they're going to have to take matters into their own hands to get anything done? Like, that noise? That's Momo. She's the embodiment of that sound. Takakura might seem kind of vanilla at first, but he becomes more interesting as the show goes on. Dandadan is such a hit because it brings the crazy back to anime in a good way. Its visuals are gorgeous and frenetic, and I could use the same words to describe the plot. It's got some of the best animation for its action scenes of the year, or even the decade so far. It's crass and brazen at times, while never being just about being crass and brazen, if that makes sense. Like, sure, at one stage in the show, the old witch steals Takakura's dong. But it's not just to try and be edgy and extreme. The point is that the show is laid back enough to have a plot point about his dong in the first place. I promise I will stop saying dong. For some people, the show's frank treatment of sex or sexual themes is going to be off-putting, so if you somehow missed this show and are wondering whether or not to check it out, keep that in mind. But if you like zany, unhinged anime plots with tons of stylized flair in its visuals, then Dandadan is a must-see. Number 2, Yatagarasu, The Raven Does Not Choose Its Master. I can't tell you how many times I've flipped Yatagarasu back and forth between number 1 and number 2. It's a great show with so many unpredictable moments. The reason why it's not in the number 1 spot is that the number 1 show is slightly better at humor, which is not the main focus of this show. Yatagarasu is a much more serious, courtly drama mirrored after the Chinese imperial court, except instead of Chinese humans, the court is run by gigantic three-legged crows who usually prefer to shapeshift into human form. The show has a pretty complex plot that I explain in a different video, so I won't say much here, but the Kingdom of Ravens is about to choose a bride for the next emperor. Each province sends a bridal candidate, and since the eventual queen will bring a lot of power and influence to her home province, there are all kinds of stratagems, backdealings, and backstabbings in the works. Much of the show follows the young Yukiya as he enters into the service of Wakamiya, the crown prince. Both of them are highly intelligent people who often seem to clash with each other, only to reveal that their actions were for the benefit of the other person all along. If I had to point to one strength of Yatagarasu out of all the others, it would be that this show knows how to write intelligent characters. The dumb way to write smart characters is to have someone walk on screen in a lab coat and say, "I'm so smart that I just invented this time-traveling coconut on my lunch break. Did I mention that I'm 12 years old? I'm just that smart." The smart way to write smart characters is to have them do something intelligent so that the viewer actually respects them. That's really hard to do, and Yatagarasu does it over and over again. It's not always the easiest show to follow, but for those who do, it's a highly rewarding show. This might have the best writing of the year, both for plot twists and character development. This show deserves more viewers, so go watch one of the best anime of 2024 if you haven't yet done so. But as much as I love Yatagarasu, there is one other anime that I felt was the standout for 2024. Number 1, Delicious in Dungeon. There's a game that I don't want to spoil where you're trying to defeat a certain villain, but when you do, you realize that you are nowhere near the end. The plot opens up to a different goal entirely, and you realize the full scope of the game. That's Delicious in Dungeon. This was not my favorite anime of the year during the first several episodes. I found the characters pleasant but kind of forgettable, and I was mainly watching for the artwork and the interesting world building. It was still good, but it wasn't until the characters achieved their initial goal halfway through that you realize you haven't even started what the show is really about. From then on, Delicious in Dungeon is the best show of the year. Delicious in Dungeon follows a party of explorers led by Laios Tauden in a fantasy setting. While exploring the depths of a dungeon, Laios' sister Fallon is eaten by a terrifying red dragon. Most of the party scatters, but Laios is able to form a new party with some of the previous members, and they go back into the dungeon to try to save his sister before she's completely digested by the dragon. They should be able to use magic to resurrect her as long as they can recover her body. Since the new party is out of money, they have to resort to eating monsters in the dungeon to survive. And thus you have the plot of the early episodes, where Laios wants to eat a new monster, Marcel resists, but then Senshi delivers a cooking masterpiece that makes the monster eating all worth it, usually. I will say that I took an instant liking to Marcel, the party's elven mage. She's the one person who reminds everyone that eating these monsters is more than a little bit crazy. She's also the one who sells the deliciousness of the food. If Laios takes a bite and says it's great, that's what you would expect. But if Marcel scrunches up her face with disgust, reluctantly takes a bite, and then immediately transforms into someone who just ate the most delicious thing that they've ever had, then you know the food was good. I love that Senshi is there as this endless repository of monster cooking knowledge who eggs on Laios to even greater heights of monster eating depravity. I'll be honest, with Chilchuk, I can still take him or leave him. But at least he was never an active drain on the experience for me. But that twist in plot and tone at the midway point is one of the more memorable anime experiences of 2024, as the show goes from monster recipe of the week to something with far higher stakes. It's something you rarely see pulled off successfully, and Delicious in Dungeon is a journey that I highly recommend going on if you haven't yet. There are plenty of great shows that didn't make the list, so let me know what your top 5 was down in the comments. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.